Good morning. I'm John Martinez. I'm the sales manager here at Total Solutions, and I just wanted to say thank you for taking time out of your day to come to the event live last week if you were able to, and for anyone joining us here for the first time virtually. This is our first event since before the pandemic, and so we did have a few technical issues leading up to the event, and so we wanted to make sure that we can present this information in a way that's very consumable for you guys. And so we do have a great presentation coming up here that we'll be jumping into shortly from our first presenter, Ryan Jesperson from United Training, on unleashing the Power Platform. There should be some cool demos and great information there. And stick around for the second presentation from a design consultant from our team, Adit Ahmed. It's going to be tackling modernizing legacy workflows and kind of where to start from there. And so thank you again for joining us here today. And if you can take 5 minutes after watching the video to fill out the feedback form, that would be greatly appreciated. And again, thanks for growing the Microsoft community.
There's programs that you still download. There is still types of coding, but it's not meant to be overly difficult. So there's a language called the Power FX language that we can use inside of Power Apps. It's a lot like Excel, and the code that you write will be more formula based and simplified. In Power BI, we use the DAX language, and in Power Automate, there are some expressions, but again, it's more of this formulaic sort of language. So less coding, more building into these different components. Now, depends on who you ask what the big pieces of the Power Platform are, but there's definitely a big three: Power Apps, Power Automate, and Power BI. Power Apps is this ability to build applications. So you can build apps that you can access through your desktop. You can embed them into a team and access them through Teams. You can put them onto a SharePoint web page. You can access them on your phone. But they're meant to be quick and easy interfaces where we can get into our data, manipulate it, add records in, edit records, delete things, lots of different possibilities in an interface that's quick and easy to handle. So the same way that we take our phones and we open up different apps and play around on social media or in games or anything like that, we're going to be able to do that with our business information through Power Apps. Power Automate is the workflow automation program that basically replaces what was stuff like SharePoint Designer. We can use Power Automate in their cloud flows to build a bunch of no-code automation workflows connecting not just to Microsoft, but to about 300 plus other programs out there, with more being added every single day. Flows are going to be able to be created and automatically run, manually run, or scheduled to be run. There is also now a Power Automate desktop program where we can even get into robotic process automation and get into the possibility of getting into those legacy programs that don't have an API interface or don't have any sort of connection, and being able to automate those tasks for people who work with those sorts of systems. Power BI comes from Excel, so it's the next level of Excel. You can think of it like it may be Excel on steroids. And what it does is it takes the data model and Power Query from Excel and turns it into its own program. We bring data in, and the data can be scaled into insanely large sizes, millions and millions of records. And we get to create a relational database data model from all these different sources, and then model it, build additional columns, build additional measures, and visualize it in reports and dashboards. So we can take the information we get by entering stuff in Power Apps and the parts that come through with Power Automate and be able to report back on it with analytics and information from Power BI. Now, Power Virtual Agents is one of the new kids on the block. They're really cool, but we're not going to probably do much with them today. These are chatbots. So in the Power Platform, you have this ability to build chatbots, and you build topics, and the chatbots are able to talk back and forth and answer questions. So when you have people who come in into your team and they want to ask some of those basic questions, help desk questions in your company, you would have a chatbot that could actually talk back to them, give them information. Chatbots can also utilize things like Power Automate to be able to get information and run workflows. So a chatbot can trigger a workflow. Now, in addition to the Power Platform, there are, the big four, there's a bunch of other pieces in here as well that, again, we're probably not going to have time to discuss, but we can kind of see it there. Now, the Dataverse, which you can capitalize the V or apparently not, I don't know why it's capitalized there. The Dataverse replaces the Common Data Service, and it's Microsoft's in-house database. So in Office 365, with every environment, you can potentially have an internal database. It's meant to be easy to work with, builds in a lot of pre-built tables. But what's really neat about the Dataverse is how it's used by the rest of the Power Platform without you having to know it. If you do an approval flow inside of Power Automate, all that approval piece comes in through the Dataverse. That's where it stores the information and collects it and sends it out and stuff like that. If you do an AI builder, it's the data that you train it with and it brings in is again stored in the Dataverse. So there's a lot of pieces that the Dataverse will be integrated with that you don't even have to know about. So it's already part of your Power Platform, and you can also use it as its own primary data source. It scales up, does cool things. AI Builder allows you to train an AI to do things like find information in text or read a business card, extract information from an invoice, or find images inside of various pictures. You train it, it learns, it does. It's really easy because it's an AI. It's not something where you have a ton of code to go into. It can be integrated with Power Automate and Power Apps to be able to upload a picture or have a picture get taken in a Power App and have an AI extract the text from it. Or I can have a picture uploaded into SharePoint or an invoice uploaded into a SharePoint library, and a Power App can take the information out, or an AI Builder can take the information out of it and then put it into a SharePoint list or something else. Now, model-driven apps connect with the Dataverse. They're a type of Power App. We're not going to talk a lot about them today because they only allow us to work with the Dataverse. So model-driven apps are a type of Power App that we're going to see a little bit of, but mostly kind of ignore. And then portals are another Power App aspect where we can build websites that can both be internal or external. So you can have a website that could actually be accessed from the real world from anybody if you want to. Now, the whole point of all these different programs is to bring them together. So you can have a Power App where you interact with information, and by adding a record or editing a record, you trigger a workflow. All of that information you're storing in SharePoint or SQL or the Dataverse can then be reported on through Power BI. We can do all sorts of different, combinations of these three, or leave one out, or do whatever. You can even see that things like Power BI tiles, in this example in the middle here, can even be integrated into a Power App. And recently, they've added the ability to add Power App components into a Power BI report. So now it can go that way as well. If I wanted to be able to show information in more of a Power App way, instead of the way that you can do it inside of Power BI. So sometimes when you want to see more information in a more of a stylized sort of gallery, you can do that with a Power App now inside of a Power BI report. Okay. So like I said before, anybody who's just joined us, you are welcome to ask questions in the chat window at any point. I believe all the mics are off, so that'll be the easiest way to do it. But let's go ahead and we'll do, again, a quick introduction to Power Apps, Power Automate, and Power BI, see a little bit more about them, and then I'll get into an actual live demo of the whole thing. So a little more PowerPoint than some actual real stuff. So Power Apps is this Microsoft product that allows us to connect to data and display it, interact with it, add to lists, edit lists, stuff like that. There is no code inside of a Power App, so you can't use JavaScript or anything like that. There's like one little bit of possibility of using HTML, but that's it. The whole difference is they use this language called PowerFX, which is the new branding for it, and it's an Excel-like language. So the more you know about if functions, the better you're going to be at the coding of a Power App. And so if you boil it down to the most basic premise. What a Power App is screens that you interact with where you get to put objects on the screen. Every object has many properties. Its color, its fill color, does it have a border, what text does it display, all these properties. And what you do is you modify the properties. That's all it is. So put things on a page, modify the properties, and it's a little bit like a magic trick. If you can make people think that something's happening, even if it's not really happening, it works. Same thing that we do with PowerPoint. When you make things appear one at a time or do different things, it's not that you're necessarily doing anything magical here. It's just, hey, I have something that it was invisible and now it's visible. Same thing you'll see with a Power App. The two types of Power Apps you can create are Canvas and model driven. And the best way to imagine the differences is exactly what they depict on these little pictures right here. Canvas apps are blank canvases. And so on this blank canvas, I can do anything. I can be Picasso. I can also be myself, which is horrible at art. So the hard part about Canvas apps is that you have to actually paint the canvas. You have to build the whole thing out. So it's not overly easy, but you do have complete and utter control over everything that's going to happen on that app. Canvas apps can also connect to 300 plus different data sources. So if you want to connect to SharePoint or a SQL Server or the Dataverse or Twitter or anything else, you can connect using a Canvas app. Model-driven apps only connect to the Dataverse. They are basically a way of viewing tables of your Dataverse in their own standalone app. So you build a table in the Dataverse, or you have multiple tables in the Dataverse, and you bring them into a model-driven app. And the views, the forms, the charts you build for those tables in the Dataverse are what you show in a model-driven app. So the depiction that they show is like a puzzle. So if I buy a Monet puzzle, I can put it together and I have a Monet in front of me. I didn't have to paint a thing. I couldn't do that if I tried, but hey, I put the puzzle together. That's all I had to do. So imagine having, a very, very easy, maybe a 50-piece puzzle that you could put together, and hey, you got yourself a picture, versus a completely blank canvas and a bunch of paint, and now you have to paint the picture. You can do more with the Canvas app, but it's going to take a little bit more work. Model-driven is great for those Dataverse solutions if you want to do it. Now, because of the fun of Canvas apps, that's the thing we're going to really talk about today. How we build these apps, what we can do with them, the formulas, the components, and all those different pieces. Where you build your Power Apps for these Canvas apps are in the Power Apps Studio. So these Canvas apps that we build are entirely done in the browser. There is no downloading software or anything like that you have to do. You open them up in the browser, you add things to them, you write in these formulas, you set them up, and you build them in this studio. You'll see at the top, there's a kind of familiar Microsoft ribbon where you do things, you insert things in, and you can change what you're looking at in the Home tab and the settings. There's a formula bar, just like in Excel, where you write in the properties for each of your different properties. So what you want the value to be, whether it's an RGBA function or whether you literally write in the word white or black or gray or yellow. On the left, you have the different sections of Power BI. So you can go from tree view to the data sources to the media section. Over on the right, you have the similar properties that you're doing up here. You can also do them over here on the right. So the properties are nice on the right for simple things like font sizes and font choices rather than writing a formula. But when you start to get into more complicated things, the formula bar becomes pretty useful. And then, of course, right here on our page, we have the actual Power App itself. So we'll see a Power App. We'll see a couple of them, actually. We'll get to interact with them and build them in a little bit. Next, let's talk about Power Automate. Power Automate, which is also known as Flow. And so the first thing to know is whether you call it Flow or Power Automate, no one's going to really care. If you're Googling and you find a bunch of stuff that only says Flow, check the dates because it could very well be an older source. Power Automate has gone through some kind of changes overall. And so if you read too many articles from like 2018, you might find information that's not actually true anymore or potentially, a little messy. With Power Automate, there are cloud flows and there are desktop flows. So you can see I even have this thing that says browser-based studio, no install required. That's true of the cloud flows. The desktop program is actually a downloaded program that you can install on your computer. Now, again, like Power Apps, there's a difference, cloud flows and desktop flows. The desktop program is something you can download and include automatically. It's meant to run on your computer. So right now, the biggest problem with the desktop flows is unless you pay them more money, you have to manually trigger every flow. But if you have a legacy piece of software, you could potentially have an Excel file and have that legacy piece of software open and have a flow that maps things over into a form and submits them automatically. Or you could have a desktop flow that opens up a bunch of tabs automatically to certain websites, enters in passwords. I've been working with a desktop flow to make my life a little easier in the morning when I first get my computer up going so I could get the 4 websites I have to have open. The only problem is because I don't want to pay for the premium plan, I have to manually trigger it. So it ends up kind of being, not as useful as I would have hoped. Now, the ones we're going to talk about today are the cloud flows. Cloud flows exist in the browser and in the cloud. They interact with data in the cloud. There is this ability with what's called a data gateway to potentially work with local data. It's a little trickier and it will cost more money. So we're mostly going to talk about the cloud flows and the cloud data sources. So you can, again, connect to 300 plus different data sources. You can have them triggered manually, automatically, or on a schedule. And these are the things that we think of when we're really thinking of Power Automate, the flows that are replacing SharePoint Designer or other workflow programs that are going to automate parts of our life. Now, in these cloud flows, we said there's 3 types of triggers. So when you see what they call types of cloud flows, what they're really basically saying is category of trigger. So every flow starts with a trigger and then there's actions afterwards. If it's an instant flow, you have to manually trigger it. So you could have a flow that's on your phone as a Power Automate button. I had a great flow for the longest time that sadly I don't have to use as much anymore. When I would go to a place and teach, I would have them fill out a sign-in sheet. I had a flow that I'd press a button, type in the name of the company, select the account executive, and then take a picture of the sign-in sheet and then press done, and it would automatically upload it to my OneDrive with a naming convention in place. It would then email it to the account executive and other people with any other information and stuff I provided. So I would be able to send off this picture with very little work. But it was an instant flow. We'll see an instant flow today in a Power App where you can actually push a button in a Power App to trigger a flow. Now, automated flows are the ones most people are trying to build, the things that you don't have to think about. They just happen. So having something added to a SharePoint list triggers the flow, and then the flow does its thing. Having something modified in a SharePoint list triggers the flow. So things like that are possible. You can have it be SharePoint, you can have it be Teams, you can have it be Office, Outlook. You can have it be all these different online sources that trigger something when something happens. This is where you'll see most of the different trigger types. One important thing, I'm just going to kind of hang it out there, and you'll have to do more research on your own. Power Automate connects to these data sources not in the same way that SharePoint Designer did, where it was kind of integrated in. So if you have something like SharePoint and you have a flow when something's modified, you have to be really careful of infinite loops, because it can potentially trigger itself if, when it's modified, it goes through and does something. It could then trigger itself again to go through and do something, and then go back and go through and through. So there's things, there's trigger conditions. There's also ways people put in little end the flow things and stuff like that. So keep that in your back pocket for today. Schedule flows are one of the other really cool new features here, where we can have a flow run once a day, once a week, every 2 hours, once every 2 weeks, whenever we want it to, and it can then do what we tell it to do. So if I wanted to have a SharePoint library and I wanted people to fill out metadata, and maybe once a day I have the flow look at that library and say, hey, that file doesn't have any metadata. Let me email the creator and tell them they need to go do that. And I don't have to think about it. The flow just does its work once a day. Flows also have issues with duration. So you can't have a flow necessarily pause for 6 or 8 months and then kick itself back off. You generally, what you do is you have that date, knowing when it needs to be triggered, and you'll have a scheduled flow run once a day. And when that date shows up, hey, it triggers it. So scheduled flows are a way around the 28-day limit for a flow's continuous running. Once you start building flows, what you'll put in are actions. This is where we connect to the different connectors and put in different things like conditions, sending emails, adding things or modifying things in a data source. All that can be done as a flow action. And then finally, all these different connectors. Now, last but not least, we'll do a quick intro to Power BI. The biggest thing to know about Power BI is the different components of it. The data set is the data that you're using for the report. A report is like a dashboard. People sometimes think of reports as being dashboards, and so be very careful because there is a thing called a dashboard, and that's not actually what you want. Reports are what we build in the Power BI desktop, and they're the thing we use to build what you see on the right here, lots of visuals on a single page. So to actually build any of these visuals, you have to have a report. You will not be able to do this in a dashboard. Dashboards are aggregate pieces, like Google News. Google News doesn't actually make any news. They just bring all the news into one place. A dashboard doesn't create any sorts of visuals. It takes visuals from multiple reports and shows them on the single page. So dashboards are great, but they're not the thing you're thinking of when you're building a quote unquote dashboard. You're actually building a report, and reports can be embedded into web pages and viewed in Teams. So dashboards are still useful, but you'll find that a majority of your time, probably reports are the things you're going to want to build. You can connect again to all those different data sources, including online or on-prem data sources. You can have a data gateway for data refreshes and all sorts of pieces there. And all of this is done in the Power BI desktop, these reports that we build. So the first thing, the first two programs, everything's cloud-based, cloud-based, cloud-based. Power BI, you need to have the Power BI desktop, and that's where you build these reports. The final step of that is to publish it to the service, and that's where you're going to view and share and embed from for those reports. So you build the file and publish it, and then when it's published, you go online and you get the file there, and then you can use that to embed in Teams and so forth, things like that. Okay, so made it through, lickety split, no problem. Let's put all of this together and let's kind of see a process in place. So in Microsoft 365, when you go to the All Apps, you'll see Power Apps and Power Automate and Power BI. Weird little trick, if you don't see Power BI, sometimes people don't. If you go to powerbi.com and you click sign in and you sign in using your Office 365 account, it usually means you have an account. They just don't put it there. So some organizations don't show Power BI, but once you sign in once, the next day it'll be there and you won't have to think about it. So you'll find these apps right here and you can open them up. So here in Power Apps, you can see I have the ability to access my different apps. I also have the data section, that's the Dataverse right there. Chatbots and the AI builder all in one place. So here I'm going to show you two different apps that are being built. Both of them use SharePoint as the backend. So I'm using SharePoint lists as the backend. That's a nice data source for Power Apps because you don't have to pay any extra money. You get to control SharePoint, and the list and the integration, the formulas and stuff are relatively straightforward. There is some issue with delegation, and if you do go past the 5,000 item SharePoint limit, you have to do a couple tricks with SharePoint to make sure it's okay. But you actually can go past the 5,000 item limit, and the Power App won't have any problems with it. You just have to index any column that you're going to search, and you have to make sure that your views in SharePoint don't exceed 5,000. But the Power App itself won't have any trouble with that. You'll be able to still go past that amount. So here are two apps in Studio View, and here they are in real life. So this is actually a full-fledged training registration app where people get to come and they can go find classes and register for them. Here in the second app is the admin app. So I'm a big fan of actually breaking up apps. Some people like to build one app for everything. I sometimes like to have apps where I have a user app where the users go to and everything's really kind of controlled and looks the exact way I want it to, and it's simple. And then I'll have an admin app that only certain people have access to, where they can do more of the kind of things that you wouldn't be able to do elsewhere. One of the really cool things about Power Apps is you have full control over what people can and can't do in it. So you don't have to worry about necessarily whether somebody has technically the permissions to do something. If you don't let them in the app, they can't do it. So for instance, this app has no ability to delete anything, because there is no buttons or anything where you can actually remove the item from the SharePoint list. There's no way to delete, even though technically they could actually delete if they went to the SharePoint site. So I get to control a lot more with Power Apps and what they see. So here is the admin app, and if I wanted to create a new class, I can click Create Class, and it's going to take me to another screen. So in these Power Apps, you navigate from screen to screen. You can press little buttons to do so and build up a kind of interface for this. Here on this screen, I'm filling out a form. So in Power Apps, you can implement forms automatically. You can make them really dynamic. You can do all sorts of different things to them. So here for the class title, we'll do as we'll call it, Power Platform Fundamentals. You'll notice there's a button that just showed up on the left here. That button is invisible until you put in a class title. So I'm not going to let you save a record without filling in certain things. You can also make fields required and stuff like that. Here I can add in a description for it. Now normally this would just be a single box that I could fill in, but if I click Add Description, I built a second piece where you can type in the information you want right here. So I can say, oh yeah, I just click Update Description, and there it is. Down here, I can put in and choose a location. If the location I want isn't there, I actually have added in an add location where I can do it. So I'm in Hartford. So let's say I'm going to host the location locally and say add location. And look at that, I can choose it there. The instructor name, start and end dates. You'll notice based on the formulas I wrote in, if I go and say, okay, I'm going to have this on November 15th, the end date also changed to November 15th. It's automatically updating as I go. If I say, oh, we're going to start at 10 o'clock, then 10 o'clock is still there. But if I changed it to, say, noon, notice how the end actually updates. Says, nah, you can't have an end time before a start time, so let's fix that. If I try to screw this up, it'll tell me, hey, no, you can't do that. You have to have it afterwards. So I'll have a noon to 5 sort of thing. Registration deadline. This is important back on the other app because the other app only shows items that you can still register for. Meeting URL, if I have one, do I want to create a Teams meeting? I can tell it to or not. Minimum and maximum participants, I can put numbers in. Let's say I just put in 1 for the maximum participant. What's going to happen is when I sign up for this class, it'll then mark the class as full. So I'll be able to see that happen as I fill different things out. Training audience, skill type. These are just ways for people to search for things and be able to fill, to go down and find what they're looking for. Power hour and large event. These are parts of the workflow that make things, that do different processes. And then there's a thumbnail ID. Let's see, we'll do 8 right there. I can go ahead and create the session. There it is. Oh, awesome. It's been created. Now I can go back here. If I wanted to update or cancel a class, I could go and find it in here. I can see all the classes right here, see the information, update things, change things, anything I want to do right there. So if I want to say, oh yeah, this, we won't cancel it. We don't have enough classes to cancel. I can also go to the class information and find a class and see who's been enrolled and who maybe is waitlisted for it. Funny enough, this one's actually already marked full, even though it's not. So registered is 10. That's because I wanted to show you what a full class looked like. I actually didn't have students in there. You can actually manually add students in right away. Let's see here. And I can register somebody in automatically. You can see it actually screwed everything up, or it will in a second, because it's going to change all the different pieces there. Let me put that in. Anyways, we'll go back to here and we'll kind of get to see it there. There's also a really cool section here, the thumbnail ID that I was putting in. This is where I can go find the thumbnail IDs and know what they are. But if I need to upload a new file, I can upload a pic directly from a Power App. So I don't have to go to SharePoint. I can just go say, hey, let's go find a file here. Let's upload a Power Apps logo, and I click Upload File. Doesn't like it because I didn't refresh. That's my own fault. It's fixed and I didn't refresh. So I got tricked on that one. But it will work. There was a weird little configuration issue. But here, if I did go through this and do it, it would be fine. There's also right here this little thing for the app color. I'll show you a little bit later. So we have this admin app where people can come in and see information and add stuff in for just the few admins I give access to. The actual registration app is right here. So we have a Power App where people can come in and they can go and see the classes that are offered. Now, if I go to like the full schedule, you can see my Power Platforms Fundamentals class is there. Hartford, Connecticut. I can register for it by clicking a button. If I click the refresh button, I can get it to refresh. You can see I'm already registered for one. I can be waitlisted for one if I want to. So I can say, oh yeah, well, waitlist me for that. I want to be waitlisted. There we go. So you can see now I'm waitlisted. If I go back, into the all list right here, I can register for more. I also have a calendar view where I can see all the classes by calendar. I say, oh yeah, 4th. Do I have anything? Oh, that one's fine. I already registered for that one. Oh look, that one's on the 10th. One's right there, and I can click register, and I can confirm my registration. Now, a lot of what's happening here with the form that's being filled out, I don't have to type anything, and that's because I automate a lot of this. It knows who I am. It knows what class I'm signing up for. It knows all this stuff, and I'm having it automatically put that information inside. So I can come in and register for anything. If I want to see more information about the class, I can go to the class details. There it is. I can see the class, and I can register for it from here as well. There we go. If I want to cancel a class, I don't really want to take that one because I'm late. Oh, maybe I don't want to do that one. I can cancel it out and get rid of it. So there we go. So this is the My Registration section where I can actually see, and you can see now I can register for it again if I really wanted to, because I can see what's available and what's not. So these are the actual Power Apps. Now what's happening underneath, I'm adding records and editing records in a SharePoint list. So I have flows that are going to go through and finish the enrollment. In fact, I literally just got an email telling me I've been waitlisted. So there we go. I can go and update it if I, change it if I want to, but there we go. So I could go in and see that information. I enrolled in one earlier. You can see that information right here. All sorts of cool stuff going on there. Now these are being automated through a Power Automate flow. Now, why didn't I do a flow for the app itself? Doing it from here makes more sense for SharePoint because I might enroll maybe some other method. Maybe there's another way for me to potentially enroll. If the training admin goes and enrolls me, we want that to still trigger. So now, doesn't matter how I do it. If I add a item to that registration list, it's going to do it there. If something happened there, we'll worry about that later. So we can go in and see what's happening in here. So the trigger is when an item is created, and it does a variety of different things as we go. If it's a large enrollment, if it's a Power App, the status is registered, different things in there. I think it's because some of these things don't have events, and that's the big problem, because of the way I created certain things. So there we go. Similarly, when I build a class, the class creation flow gets triggered. And it updates fields, creates certain variables, creates a Teams meeting if I told it to, creates the event in my calendar since I told it to, and then updates the class with that event ID so that I can get people to help register for these sorts of things. So we see this integration there. Now let me take us back and let me go into the Power App, and I'll walk you through how some of this stuff is happening and what the components are and things like that. So we'll start here on the search page. So on the search page, this left-hand portion, these buttons, these are called icons. So in the Insert tab, you can insert in a bunch of pre-built Microsoft icons, and then I use them for navigation. So the home icon right here, the property is called onSelect. So again, Power Apps, it's all about putting something on a page and then making its properties do what I want it to do. So if I click that home button, it navigates me to home. So there's a screen called home right there, and navigate is the function that takes me there. It also sets a variable called nav to false, which actually isn't really relevant anymore, but it was at one point. There's a little bit of extra in there that's unnecessary from various versioning. Also over here, you can see this object. The whole list of items is called a gallery. Galleries can be inserted. Sometimes they hide out over here on the right, but galleries can show you records. Now, not only is it showing me records, it's showing me a specific data source called a collection that I've already filtered just to the open classes. Now what happens is if I come up here and I go searching for something, so if I go searching up here for the word data, it actually changes that collection just to find me things with the word data in it. So there's the default, but what we have is we have a property called onChange. And when we change, we clear collect. Clear collect creates a collection of less records than the entire data set. So it allows us to filter it down to certain things. And this is just a big bunch of craziness here, but what's really happening here is every single one of these it's incorporating this in as well if I need it to. So if the audience or location or register is set to a certain value, it will then include that part as well. And the same happens over here. If I change the audience, it's bringing in all that information. But you'll notice if you start to break stuff down here, there's if functions, there's filter functions, similar stuff to what you do in Power BI and Excel, and that's the functions we're working with, things that are relatively straightforward. Now the register button, when you press it, sets a variable called enroll to true. And some people will have their own screen where you can just sign up for a class by filling out a form. I wanted this app to be a lot simpler. I wanted you to press a button and have the form come to you. So two things are happening here that's really pretty neat. I have a whole form. Now the form isn't anything, isn't anything crazy. It's always there. But there's a property for every object that you will really incorporate with Power Apps, and it's called visible. And visible for this one is set to the word enroll. If enroll is true, it's visible. If enroll is false, it's not visible. Pressing this X button sets enroll to false. Look at that. But when I click the register button, it sets enroll to true. So it's just a way of making something that was always there suddenly appear. And then the trick behind it, this gray thing, the gray thing is, and I just used a picture, but you could also use a label for text. But I basically put an entire picture behind it. And if you press the picture at any place, it sets it back to false. This is the trick of floating boxes like this. You could actually still technically click behind it, even though it's supposedly kind of floating. But if you put something like this behind it, then they can't click those things. And then you can make sure they don't accidentally change something up. So the little box is kind of a neat little trick to make sure I can't accidentally change the class. But you can see I can sign up for this class. And what's happening is nothing really overly special. I have a form, and this form has a bunch of fields. It just so happens that every one of these fields has a default value. So based on what I put in, it puts that information in. The end date. See all sorts of different pieces there. The class name is taking whatever's in the gallery and just auto filling in all that information so that when you register, it's simple. The student itself's even automatically done. There's a property called default selected items where I make it set to the person who's logged in right now. So they can go in and be able to do that. So we can use this Power App to register, but I built it so that you can't register for things that aren't available. If the class was canceled, if the class already happened, you can't register for those. And then when you do press the button, you don't change anything up for somebody else or anything like that. You are just registering for yourself. So everything's taken care of, and I get to control exactly what people are seeing, exactly what they can do for and stuff like that. So we have the Power App here directly in. You can see all the different pieces and so forth. So let's pause for a second, and if anybody wants to ask any specific questions about the Power App, feel free, or this one, the other one, or any of the formulas, or anything at all about that. Then we'll spend a little bit of time in Power Automate, and we'll close with some Power BI as well. So I could talk, as I do quite all the time, for 2 days easy on everything in Power Apps, and that would barely touch the surface. So feel free to ask something if you have anything. Again, you can do it in the chat window. If you're typing, just keep typing. If you don't have anything right now, that's all perfectly fine as well. Nice. So back here, looking at a flow, the class creation flow. Every flow starts with a trigger. So in this case, the trigger is when an item is created. This is the site, that's the list name. So an item gets created in this list. Then I have it update specific fields from that list automatically. So the title is the class title with the date. So I don't have it automatically done, it just does it itself. There's also a field called text ID that I automatically fill with ID. Now, if the person filling out that form had left the max empty, I make it automatically set to 2000 so that it doesn't get confused. What has to happen is for the other workflows to run, if somebody cancels or the numbers change, it runs, and if there's available space and there's people waitlisted, it adds them in there. So it needs to know a number. So if for some reason the admin leaves it empty, I make it automatically fill in the update max if empty. Now, variables are one of these secrets of Power Automate that a lot of people are just starting to kind of come around to. The thing about Power Automate, as you can see here with this create Teams meeting, is you can branch down different paths. So there are these different sorts of actions you can put in. You can put in switches, you can put in conditions, and you can branch down different paths. Now, the problem is if you have multiple paths, you don't always know which one you're going to go down. And that can be a problem. So the analogy I like to use is like if I have a branch down these two paths, imagine that I'm going to walk to my friend's house, and there are two ways I can get there, two paths. in one of the paths I could pick strawberries, and the other path I could pick raspberries. Now, when I get to my friend's house, if my friend sticks out his hand and says, give me the raspberries, if I went down the raspberry path, cool. But if I have strawberries, I'm like, I don't have raspberries, you know, it gets broken and your workflow will fail, you know, long story short. If you use a variable, going down each path, like it's having a basket. I go down one path or the other to my friend's house. I fill the basket with whatever I find. I get there, my friend says, hey, give me what's in the basket. Easy. Doesn't matter what's in there. The container was the trick. So variables are a great way to be able to get things set up at the beginning and then go down different paths. This is also a trick with my variables here to set certain values right away so you don't have to keep asking for them at different times. This one right here for the variable start, I replace the start, I get rid of a Z. And it's a silly thing, but if I want to add something to an event or something like that, I can't have the Z in it, but in SharePoint there's a Z in the start and end date. So that silly thing, but I have to do it. So I create these variables at the very beginning so that I don't have to do that replace Z every single time. And so down here, when I'm creating the Teams meeting, it's using those variables because it doesn't want those Z's, but there we go. So now I can put stuff like that in there. Now you'll notice all these little buttons and boxes. This is how we do no code in Power Automate while still technically doing code. Every one of these prior actions puts out output. So when the item is created, it knows all the fields that were in that created item. Now down here, instead of having to type in trigger output, open close parentheses, question mark, bracket, body / class title, I can just select it from a section over here to the right called the dynamic content. So I can bring in dynamic content from previous actions and be able to use it. And that's, again, why it's so important to have the variables, because if you go down a path and you create content like the update item here, if I go back here, but I didn't go down that path, I wouldn't have that information. So a variable becomes really important. If I go down the path or not, I can make sure it's set either way. But as you can see down here, it updates things with different values and so forth. So we can add in actions. As you can see with actions, you can add them in from all sorts of places. There's built-in actions directly from the workflow, standard, which you don't pay for, premium, which you do or need to have a per user plan. So we'll go back here and kind of see. The compose data operation, variables are here, schedule, so delay, stuff like that's here. The control stuff has conditions and switches and apply to eaches and all sorts of kind of neat things potentially there. You save Power Automate flows, you don't actually publish them. And once they're saved, they're live. So if you have a flow that's live, it'll run. If you go to the My Flows section, you can go and find the flow, click on it, this one right here, and go down and I can see what's going on. Now, I must have put something in incorrectly. This is the best part about Power Automate compared to the other programs we previously had. It tells me what's going on. Ooh, so down here, I apparently must have done something and left the variable start empty somehow. So, or the field is empty. But I can go through and actually see all the different pieces that we have. I must have pushed the button and it created nothing because there's no anything in there. There we go. So we can build these Power Automate flows and follow through, see what they're doing. If they're manual triggers, you can actually trigger them, although these are triggered inside the Power Automate flow, or the Power Apps specifically. But you can see I can trigger flows here as well. You can share them with other people and make them co-owners of it. One of the things that a lot of companies do with Power Automate is that instead of me building the flow, you create a generic account, it@mycompany.com, and that account is what you log into to create the flow in the first place. And once you've created the flow, then you can share it with your personal account, and then you can go back and keep working on it. But this way, especially for big business flows, ones that are going to run in your actual company for a while, you don't necessarily want a single person to be the first initial creator of it, because if they leave the company, then you have to reassign it. It just becomes a little bit more messy. But if a generic account builds those flows, that generic account will never leave the company, and you can always log in as that and be able to get to those flows quickly and easily. So as you're building flows, if it's just for you, no big deal. This reminder message, this Power Automate demo, cool. But if you build a flow that's going to be really functional for your whole company, building it from an O365 ID that's not a person, but really like a stock one or something like that, can be a big benefit overall. Okay, so we have a little bit of time left. Like I said, each of these classes can easily take up 2 days, so you gave me an hour. We're going to do it. But let's go into Power BI and keep talking. So in Power BI, we can create things in the cloud. So you actually can do things in the cloud. The only problem is if you don't have the data ready to go, creating reports in the cloud is problematic. If you want to create things and publish them in the cloud, but you need to first bring the data in, that's where the Power BI desktop program comes into play. So in the Power BI desktop program, you get to start by getting the data. So you can connect to local Excel workbooks or Excel workbooks in SharePoint. You connect to SQL Server, the Dataverse, all sorts of different possibilities. CSV files for those big, large data sets. When you do so, you open them up in what's called Power Query. Power Query allows you to model the data as it comes in. You transform it as it comes in. I can't find the file. That's okay. So here I'd be able to find all the different files and stuff like that. Now, what's actually happening here, I can fix it pretty quickly. I just need to change my data source settings. So if your data source is in the wrong place, you can change it. So if you change the data source and get it to the right location, then it can apply those changes and actually run that query. You'll see it will load it now. It's going to take a while because there's like 7 million records in this thing. So you can bring in your data and you can transform it using Power Query. So Power Query is this great tool we can use to bring in the data. Probably the coolest thing about it is that your data starts off in its normal location with it in its normal form. And what you're actually doing is what are called applied steps. So you're not editing the actual raw data. You're bringing it in exactly as it is and transforming it so that when it comes in, it's clean and ready to go. So you're able to bring it in a table format. And in this way, Power BI can connect to all those different sources we talked about, and everything comes in as the exact same data table format. So you don't have to worry about whether one database speaks to another. As long as the tables come in and they have matching fields to make a relationship, that's all you need. But you could connect SQL with a CSV, with SharePoint, with an Excel file, with an Oracle database, all into one kind of Frankenstein data model that nonetheless will work no problem. So we can make all these sorts of connections. Scope is also not a big deal. You can connect to millions and millions and millions of records. As you can see right here, some of these files are pretty ridiculous in terms of their size, and you can bring it in. Now, once you bring it in, you model it on this left-hand side in the model area. So this needs to finish up. It'll be done in just a few seconds. And we go into the model area and you generate the different connections between your different tables. So it's a relational database. You build the relations, one-to-manys, one-to-ones. You can't really do many-to-manys, but you can create calculated columns that could be unique and then do one-to-manys that way. So you would be able to have two together, but you'd have to create like a concatenated column to do so. So there we go. We got all this data in there. Give it a second. It's got to figure out what it's doing. There we go. So here is the model section. You can see I can drag relationships from tables to tables and build the information I want to. In the table section, or the data section, I can generate calculated columns as well as calculated measures and even entire calculated tables. So building a date table, I can do so with the calendar function, and I can just build one in right away. But here in sales, I can create measures, like adding them up, get it to be formatted the way I want it to, and then be able to view that information inside of my report. So once you have modeled and built the data using DAX functions, which is the exact same as Power Pivot, you can then go into the report, and here in the reports, I can build visuals. So you build visualizations, put the fields in specifically, and you're able to then see your item. You can actually see here that I built a second tooltip to be able to see specific things back in here. So I can do that. I also built buttons that change to different bookmarks. So I could look at my data by quarter. Year, oops, held the wrong key down. Month. Now, when you're done working in Power BI, you publish these things up into the cloud. So we can publish them up into the cloud, and then up here in the cloud service, you can open up a file, open up one of these reports, and you can share it with other people. You can go to the file to get embed codes for SharePoint or websites or all sorts of things. You can manage the permissions right here. You can even technically edit up in the cloud. You can do all the same stuff we can do in the desktop. It's just most people get comfortable with the desktop, so that's where they work. Notice you can pin pieces or all of a page into a dashboard. So these dashboards rely on our data here being pinned in. So do stuff there. Now, all of this, as we've seen here, can be brought into things like Teams. So you can put an entire Power App or more into Teams, and everyone can interact with it from here. You don't have to go look around for it or anything like that. Just right here in Teams. You can embed Power BI reports directly inside of a team and be able to view them here. We can view them on devices and interact and do all sorts of kind of really cool, interesting things here between our different data sources. You can see back here, I can go into the tab and actually register for classes here inside. And there we go. Okay. So we have about 4 minutes left. Again, I want to open it up and see if anybody has any kind of further questions. What we've seen so far, we learned a little bit about what Power Apps, Power Automate, and Power BI are. Many of you probably already know these things. And just a demo of bringing all those pieces together, bringing in a Power App with Power Automate flows to further the thing, sending out emails, sending approval steps, or things like that, and then being able to see all that information in and analyze that information using Power BI. So with a few minutes left, if you want to ask any questions, chat window is open. Haven't seen anything there yet, but maybe there's something you're saving for the end. And if not, then you're pretty much good to go. So let me know what questions you might have. John, that's a good question. What type of additional licensing, if any, is required to use the Power Platform? Most Office 365 accounts, you'll have access to Power Apps, Power Automate, Power BI without any additional fees. Now, every one of them has additional costs that you can incur based on what you use. The biggest one for a lot of these is going to be what they call premium connectors. So if you want to use in your data source, any data connector that has a diamond next to it, you're going to need a per user plan or a per app plan. Same thing inside of a Power Automate flow if you go in for the connectors, and they're the same for both. So once you know that SQL Server sadly is a premium connector, you say, okay, this is going to cost us more money. So those sorts of licensing are important. The reason I really like SharePoint as a data source is because it's included. So that doesn't cost you anything more. In fact, everything I showed you in the Power App that I built using SharePoint as the data source, and then all these Power Automate flows, nothing was going to cost me any additional money. Power BI, this was going to be free, although building dashboards and sharing dashboards does usually mean you need to get the Power BI Pro license. But that's $10 a month, and a lot of organizations are willing to kind of foot the bill for there. So there is a great aspect of this that you get to include just as part of your O365 license, but you have to slightly be careful there, because if you don't have plans or you use the wrong types of connectors, then those extra costs can come into play. Microsoft has a really handy document they update every month called their licensing guide, and you can grab one of those just by Googling it, and then be able to take that licensing guide and see what am I going to get for what plan I have. Dynamics gets you a little extra cool stuff, and then you have a choice between there's a cheaper per user plan and a slightly more expensive one. The other stuff, AI builders, chatbots, those also cost extra. EBS, can we access the recordings? I'll let John take care of that one. Chris, what about viewing Power BI reports but not creating them? Power BI reports should be fine as long as you put them in the right place and you give people access. People should be able to view them, no problem. So you can build Power BI reports, and then other people can interact with them and view them. It's more about sharing dashboards specifically, because people can manipulate those, or people building the Power BI reports themselves. So yeah, so you should be able to view them regardless of your licensing thing. And there's even a free license that people can get for Power BI. You can actually get like a consumer version of Power BI for free if you go to powerbi.com and just sign in with your Google account or your Hotmail account or something like that. Let's see, Matt, you spoke about a strategy of one big app versus several small apps. Could you extrapolate the benefits of that approach a bit? So the biggest thing about Power Apps that I find is that if you want to have one big app, there might be like the admin area of the app where the admins are doing certain things, and then there's going to be the consumer area of the app where the users are doing things. Now, the easiest way to let some people have access to part of it but not the other is going to be by knowing who they are and having a list of those admins. So if I knew that these 3 people were the only people who should have access to one of these icons, I could write a formula in its visibility property and say, this is only visible if your email is equal to one of these 3 emails. And so I could write a formula to do that. But if I have to do that 50 times all over the place because I have a bunch of different sections, that could be a big problem. So I like the idea of having certain hidden sections sometimes. But if it's to the point of saying, well, this could really just be 2 separate apps, I prefer that method so that I can have a user experience app where that you can't add classes in this one. You can't edit classes. You can't delete anything. I mean, all you can do in this app is sign up for classes or cancel your enrollments. That's it. And so that way I don't have to worry about somebody accidentally getting into the wrong section or anything like that. And then I have an admin app, and the admin app, they can do anything. They have all sorts of power, but I only have given permissions to 5 people for this admin app. So the people who can actually even access it are very, very few. Anybody else trying to wouldn't even get access. So Power Apps doesn't work as well with like kind of like that line level access. So you have to kind of build it in. So that's the big strategy I think of is I might want multiple apps. Now, at the same time, if I have 7 SharePoint lists, each of them needing a form to fill out for HR purposes or things like that, I would build one app and let you go into one app to fill out 7 different forms if you want to. And that's a better benefit than making you go to 7 different apps or 7 different SharePoint lists. So that you can flip that around and also say, hey, look at that. And then, yeah, Matt, so I'm following up. Yeah, lots of different permissions. Probably good to split that up. Yeah, if I had one app and I had 2 different teams and they're basically completely separate, I would probably build 2 teams. Now, cool thing about Power Apps, you can export an app and then you can import it in. So if you want to basically duplicate an app, you could build an app, export it out, and then import it in as a copy, give it a different name, and now you have 2 of the same app. You just change up what you want and you change the access and things. So that's pretty great. Carolyn asks, where do the apps reside in the tenant? Everything basically lives in the Dataverse, but apps and Power Automate flows will be per environment. So if you have more than one environment, switching environments would show you different apps potentially. So you do have to remember that if you are working in different environments, you might have different permissions in the Dataverse and stuff like that. And so you can go in and find, different apps and different flows for different ones. Now, if your app connects to something like SharePoint, it doesn't really matter where you put it in an environment, but every environment can only have one Dataverse instance. So if I want to use the Dataverse as a data source, it has to be in that environment that I built the app. And then let's see here. We have maybe one more and I let you go. Chris says, does United Training have Dynamics 365 developer training? Yes, I believe we do. I could not give you the course off the top of my head, but unitedtraining.com, and you'll probably find it just as fast, just with a keyword search, just simple and easy there. So awesome. All at the end. You guys did great. Fantastic questions. Anything else you want to ask or talk about before I let you go?
Going once, going twice, sold.
All right, fantastic. Thank you all, everybody.
Great job, Ryan. Let's give Ryan a big round of applause here on Teams for the presentation that he just gave there. So right now we are going to take a slight break, a 5-minute break, and reconvene here back at 12:20. Thanks again to Ryan for that great presentation. And Adit will be talking about the all too familiar problem of what to do with your legacy workflows when modernizing, and kind of what steps to take to be ready for that project as well. So we're going to be back here at 12:20, kicking off here. So giving people a couple minutes for a quick bio break and the second presentation of the day. And thanks again for everyone who's made it out so far. And if, like we said before, if you have any questions during Adit's presentation as well, or any additional questions for Ryan, feel free to drop them in the chat and we'll try and get them answered today. And if not, we'll follow up with the answer that you're looking for. So with that being said, we'll give 4 minutes here and reconvene shortly. Thank you guys. Alrighty, folks. Hopefully that was enough time to take care of a little bio break. Did want to address the question before, and I know we mentioned it in the chat, but we will be sending out a video recording of this event. So fear not if you missed anything, but like we said before, also feel free to add questions in the chat at any point here, and we'll try and get to them as soon as possible. And without further ado, I will pass it over to Adit Ahmed to give his presentation.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, John. Hope everyone's doing well at the second half of this M365 Summit. It's good to be back. These events, I remember being at the last in-person event that we had a couple of years back, so definitely good to be back in the rhythm here with the M365 Summit in partnership with United Training. Just to introduce myself, I'm Adit Ahmed, and I'm a design associate here at Total Solutions. And today, I want to focus on building off what we learned from Ryan. Ryan taught us a lot about the platforms that we have available in the Power Platform, the tools available at our disposal. But in a lot of cases, these tools are leveraging workflows and processes that we built way back when, whether it was on a previous environment that we had or processes that we haven't even thought about bringing online. And that is really the focus of my presentation here today. How might we consider the process of modernizing our legacy workflows? So just a little bit to start about Total Solutions. We are an industry-leading SharePoint Microsoft 365 consultancy working around all things Microsoft. This includes Microsoft 365, the Power Platform, building custom software, as well as software products that we have built out that support both sides of that equation, Microsoft 365, as well as the custom software piece. We are based out of Metro Detroit, but we have employees who are based across multiple states in the United States. I myself am based in Virginia, and we have most of the organization is based in Michigan. And despite that geography, we have clients who are local to the Metro Detroit area, international clients as well, and working with multiple folks in the Fortune 100. So we are really working with environments of all sizes to build out SharePoint intranets, Power Apps, Power Automate workflows, as well as custom software. As for myself, I am a design associate here at Total Solutions. I joined the company about 2 years ago. And just for a little bit of primer on what a design associate does, my main goal is to bridge the gap between the business and the technology. We are, as a Total Solutions, we are experts in the Microsoft 365 space and how to leverage technology to help improve business processes and business systems. So my goal is to really help uncover those needs from the perspectives of those who are working with, design out possible solutions visually, as well as to help our developers build out strategies and ways of translating the needs of our users into actual software and technology products. And I do that across clients as well as for prospects who we have who are interested in working with us in the future. And as for myself, I'm based in the Metro DC area, so Arlington, Virginia. I'm a big music fan, and you can talk to me about buses or Carly Rae Jepsen any day. So very open to that, but also here to focus on Power Platform and legacy workflows here. As for where we see this conversation going, so I've been using the term modernizing legacy workflows a lot, and I'm sure you saw that in the event title, but I want to make sure that we define what that actually means. What are we trying to modernize? What is the purpose of us modernizing in the first place? And once we kind of understand where we're going there, we want to make sure how can we build out a journey to the cloud? What are the first steps we can take? It can be very ambitious to take a legacy process, whether it is one that exists on a previous system or one that just exists on paper, and bringing that into the cloud as nebulous as it can be. On top of that, one of the major decisions that comes into play is what platform to consider. We have the Power Platform at our disposal as Microsoft 365 users, but we also have custom software as we've always had. What do we want to consider when we're moving in the cloud? And ultimately, how do we take the plan that we've built out and put it into action? We want to build off the experiences that we have with our customers who are going through this process day in and day out, so that we can help your organization take first steps in taking some of those old finicky processes and bringing them into the new way of the cloud. So just to kind of level set where we're starting here. So I'm curious, I guess we can probably put up hands or just give ourselves a little laugh or whatnot. How many of us are experienced with InfoPath or Nintex or SharePoint Designer? Yep, we're getting a lot of folks out here. Yeah, so as many of us are aware, those platforms are really how we found ourselves automating workflows with using technology. Back in the day, we would have on-premise servers that exist in a closet, in our offices, or just somewhere else where we can access, where we would house our SharePoint environment, as well as our Exchange servers, as well as InfoPath, SharePoint Designer, and Windows Workflow Foundation workflows. The Microsoft platform has always offered that out of the box. And over the past couple of years, we've seen people use them in wild, creative, and very functional ways. And that is the platform that Microsoft has provided to us to build out applications and forms that help us get our work done. If what Microsoft offered wasn't enough, then we have the likes of Nintex and K2, who are now under the umbrella of Nintex. But we had third-party tools which were really our only real option outside of the Microsoft sphere working within these on-premise servers if we wanted to create workflows that built off of SharePoint and the rest of these servers that we have set up for our organization to use. If these third-party tools or InfoPath wasn't enough, then we could always build an app that lived on the server. This is really the only way that we're able to build out customizations like event receivers and build out integrations with other tools that we may be accessing. It would require a lot of code, a lot of effort, and things might break every so often. But when it came to using these apps on servers, that helped us meet some of the gaps that these on-premise and third-party applications didn't necessarily offer us, as well as being able to build out more sophisticated applications altogether. Of course, over the past 20, 30, 40 years, we've seen a lot of transformation in this space. And really, when it comes down to the new world of things, we have seen a world of change. We have cloud workflow platforms that outrank what we've seen in the past. In addition to Nintex moving to the cloud and moving into the more sophisticated space of what we've seen as the industry has changed, we've also seen purpose-built workflow platforms, additional players in the space, Integrify, GoCanvas, and others, who are allowing us to build out desktop and mobile workflows on dedicated platforms. We also have workflow functionality that exists within larger enterprise tools. Folks are using ClickUp, Zoho, and others to create workflows within systems that they already use to run their business. Of course, Microsoft has become a leader in this space with the Power Platform. Ryan told us a lot about what the platform is capable of, and considering the fact that over 40% of the world, 40% of the United States is using the Microsoft 365 stack in some way, the Power Platform has found inroads in terms of continuing to be a leader in how we're building out workflows for the cloud. On top of that, as we've learned, the Microsoft Dataverse has provided us with a platform for shared data storage that our cloud applications built on the M365 platform can rely on. On top of all of this, we are still able to build out custom applications, but Microsoft, once again, is also a leader very much in this space. When it comes to Azure and Azure SQL, we are able to build out applications using these cloud-based servers that don't have to live in our closets, but are managed by a company that is working with billions and billions of megabytes or gigabytes worth of data, countless amounts of data, including our own, to ensure that we are able to maintain our applications day in and day out. We're also able to leverage Visual Studio like we always have to build out applications using Azure. But now we also have Azure Logic Apps, which I want to dive into a little bit more later in the presentation. But Logic Apps allows us to take some of the functionality that we've had with the Power Platform and use it in our own custom applications, specifically being able to build out integrations and workflows on top of the Azure platform using Logic Apps in a way that allows us to connect with the connectors that Power Automate has at its disposal as well. And the cloud applications on top of the Power Platform has really turned Microsoft into a beacon of where we can build out cloud workflows for our businesses. And ultimately, this change is happening across the industry. Markets and Markets Research estimated in 2017 that the cloud workflow market, valued then at $1.25 billion, would about triple in size to $3.85 billion by 2023, excuse me. Little did they know that in 2020, we would have one of the biggest market disruptions we have seen in our lives that has led us to project that has led 360i Research to project that the cloud workflow market, as of now, is worth $3.2 billion and is set to double in size within the next 3 years to around $6 billion. What this means for us is that regardless of whether we like where this trend is going or whether we're fully aware of where the trend is going, the train is moving. Cloud is really where things are going. And not only does that have implications in terms of where we're putting our investment, but it also has implications on how we're building out these workflows altogether. To this end, the cloud platforms are really the leaders when it comes to feature parity within these workflow platforms. All of these cloud workflow platforms are where the latest and greatest updates are being pushed. Sure, they might make their way to the on-premise form and on-premise applications in some forms, but at this point, if you want the latest and greatest in terms of feature parity, you have to be on the cloud. You have to be running these cloud-based workflow applications. To that same end, the older platforms are losing support. SharePoint 2013, SharePoint 2016, we are finding the end of life coming soon. It may not be tomorrow, but the end of life is on its way. And to that end, the platforms are stagnating where they've left, which might work for a while, but inevitably there is a change that needs to happen. And to that end, the cloud is really where the change is consistent as opposed to happening all at once. It's happening day in and day out. And to that end, the workflows that we're able to build out in the cloud have a sense of future proofing because they're changes that are being built upon themselves. The new features that are coming on are extensions of old features that have been rolled out overnight without us even realizing it. So a lot of the features and new innovations in the space are taking place on these cloud platforms, even if the on-premise versions of these platforms still exist. To that end, there are just countless platforms we can rely on to build out these workflows. All of these platforms, Microsoft and others included, are racing to beat each other out in terms of offering the best product. What this means for us is that the quality of product we have is continuously improving. This has direct implications, especially when it comes to our connector and API infrastructure. We're not living on islands anymore. Many of us on average use about 7 to 9 different business applications to run our organizations day in and day out. And this API and connector infrastructure is cognizant of that. Microsoft, with its over 200 different integrations, allows us to communicate with the different platforms we run our business on, with each platform being incentivized to work with the leading workflow providers so that we can create more sophisticated and more useful workflows. And these updates are happening across all the platforms that we're talking about. Additionally, there are many different platforms to meet the many different needs that our organizations have. There are platforms that are built for wide swaths of users, including the Microsoft Power Platform. There are also platforms that are dedicated to industries and different niches that make it very possible to find the best possible solution across multiple different workflow platforms, even more specialization than we've ever seen in the past. And of course, one of the last areas where we've seen a lot of this growth is when it comes to security. We have found that Motorola Solutions has found that there's been a reduction in security attacks from on-premise solutions to the cloud. Malware attacks have gone from 56% to 11%. Recon threats have reduced from 18% on-prem to 6% in the cloud. We are seeing a reduction in security breaches. Despite the news and what we have seen, there are still threats that are out there. But instead of us having to manage those threats as IT administrators and people managing our servers, we have a larger organization who is monitoring these threats day in and day out, or in our cloud service providers. To that end, we don't have to fix any servers that are breaking. We have someone who we're paying a fee to be able to manage that upkeep day in and day out. That is both practical upkeep as well as security upkeep. And ultimately, as with the on-premise days, there are still shortcomings. There are still loopholes. We've seen, like I've said, we've seen in the news of cloud security breaches. But the nature of the threat has changed. It's not a matter of there being more or less issues. It's just the nature of the threat. There are challenges that we faced on the on-premise days that the cloud days have fully alleviated. And ultimately, having these platforms watch out for us on a security standpoint puts us in a better place than we have seen before when we were managing our own servers. So with all that in mind, we want to really focus on how might we modernize our workflows to work within the cloud context. In our work as digital transformation leaders, we've generally seen a certain path that this workflow modernization process will take. I want to give you a little bit of a preview of how we've worked through this with different customers, and just giving you and your organizations tips so that you can run with a modernization in your own context. Find the workflows that you want to take from your on-premise or your legacy servers, or just processes that exist on paper, and bring them to the cloud in a meaningful way using the platforms that we've discussed today, especially the Power Platform, but also including custom applications. So ultimately, we see it in a somewhat linear way, a 5-step process that isn't the answer to all your questions, but at least gets us some of the way there to help us move from a legacy workflow into a fully fledged cloud workflow. And the first of these steps, when it comes down to it, is inventory. There is a certain level of work that comes with understanding the nature of the beast, understanding the problem that we have at our disposal. We want to make sure that we know this problem well enough so that we aren't running blind, and so that we can make decisions about our strategy and our next steps with a certain level of intention. Microsoft provides a tool that allows us to make progress to this end, as well as other tools that we have at our disposal. The one tool that Microsoft has to offer is the SharePoint Migration Assessment Tool, or SMAT. The SMAT tool is part of the larger SharePoint migration tool that is available to us. But the SMAT tool specifically allows us to pull data that we have from our existing environment to understand the effort needed to move it to a cloud environment. Of course, the data that this tool will pull goes beyond the nature of workflows. It is not solely for InfoPath data, but that is not necessarily a bad thing. It provides us with the data we need about how we might modernize our legacy workflows, but also provides us with data about the larger environment that we want to move to the cloud. SMAT tool will tell us what InfoPath issues we have, where our data is living, as well as information about the underlying lists and libraries where that InfoPath data has existed. On top of that, it tells you what you're unable to migrate to the cloud, so that you can have a sense of where you need to build from the ground up. Ultimately, using the SMAT tool to take stock now will make it easier for you to understand where you have to go. We also have our beloved ShareGate here, which allows us to pull out some additional context about our existing environment. ShareGate can help you find unused flows. What are the workflows that have worked in the past that may not have received any sort of traction or activity over the past months or years as we move towards this transition to the cloud? What workflows do we not need altogether? We can run usage reports to help us understand which lists and libraries aren't being updated on any sort of basis. Lists and libraries that originally might have housed a workflow that haven't been leveraged in months or years. This allows us to go back to those business users and help them understand that they have this data available to them that they can either migrate to the cloud and build a new workflow part of, or maybe the process that they built this application on doesn't necessarily have any use anymore. The business has changed. So we can use ShareGate to uncover some of those insights. And ultimately, there are many solutions that might have gathered dust over the past couple of months and years. So we want to make sure that we can uncover some of that legacy data and understand what we actually have to bring to the cloud. We don't have to bring the dirtiest parts of our closet into the new environment. We can pick and choose what we're looking for. But the first step to doing that is just taking stock of what we have on the table here. When you're pulling all of this data from the SMAT tool and from ShareGate, Microsoft and others provide ways for us to translate that data in a meaningful way. There is a lot of information that we have to work with, but especially when it comes to the SMAT tool, Microsoft provides a few resources that we can rely on to help translate this data just a little bit. Microsoft provides documentation to help us read through the SMAT reports so that the export that you get from the SharePoint Migration Assessment tool can actually be deciphered in a way that makes sense to your organization as well as your business leaders. You can also leverage some PowerShell and PNP to translate this raw Excel data into usable increments that we can take advantage of. On top of that, if we are interested in using some code, there's a GitHub repository with a workbook tool that we can use to translate some of the data that we have. So there are multiple options depending on your proficiency as well as who you're looking to communicate with as far as translating the data that you receive from specifically the SMAT tool, also from ShareGate, when taking stock of your legacy workflows. What I want to showcase here, just a little preview of what the SMAT tool looks like. We have an Excel sheet that puts out output about our environment, and it's a little bit cumbersome to look through, but we have listed items of all of the different migration issues that we found. How many issues are we facing? What are the different sites that are facing these issues across InfoPath, checked out files, alerts, and whatnot? We have multiple sheets we can rely on to decipher the data. Of course, there's a lot of data to work through. So in the QR codes on the right, you can see resources as far as how to decipher this data from Microsoft using Microsoft documentation, which provides information about each of the reports that we have available in these separate sheets. Additionally, there is some documentation available about the PNP method and then how to use GitHub to pull some of the information here and translate it in a meaningful way. And ultimately, if you need support, Total Solutions is able to translate this data as well. But there is enough information out there so that your team can run this report on its own. And whether it is your team or a vendor that you look to, being able to translate this data into a way that helps you understand the workflows and other migration components that you have to work with when moving to your new environment. Once we've taken the time to take inventory, we want to provide analysis. We want to be able to take a look at what we have and have honest conversations about the workflows we have at our disposal. One easy step to take here is to just name your workflows. Instead of referring to them by the business user, the made-up name that we might have adopted in the past, let's set names and let's set a convention so that we can have conversations about the legacy workflows that we have on the table. This includes naming the workflow to provide conversation points, as well as defining the purpose behind each of the workflows. It might feel like a lot of work to run through each of the old bones in the closet to know what we're working with. But when it comes down to it, we want to be able to discuss this inventory in a meaningful way with those who need to talk about it with a shared language. Once we develop that shared language, then we'll really want to talk honestly about the different workflows that we have. We want to be able to rank what we have on a few different parameters. And I think there are a few that we can consider because no one parameter is really the truth for any organization. Sometimes it really does come down to budget. Sometimes it is a matter of which workflows either cost the least to migrate to the cloud or rebuild in the cloud, or provide the most business value and are worth modernizing first. That's at least one parameter to think about when it comes to these workflows, and that includes talking through the business processes that are driving the different info platforms and then in-text workflows that we are migrating to the cloud. On top of that, some workflows are mission critical. If a certain step in the process doesn't happen, our business can't operate. It may take a lot of work to move the mountains there, but if that's what needs to happen, that's how we keep our organization running. So that's another matter to consider, how essential the workflow is to your organization. Additionally, there's some workflows that are just complicated. Ryan mentioned an example in Power BI of how you're able to piece together different integrated solutions. Oracle, the Microsoft 365 suite, that has existed in our on-premise days and our legacy systems. Plenty of us have those systems that are kept up by bubblegum and toothpicks. So which ones are difficult to recreate, and does it make sense for us to tackle that challenge first so that we can get the hard stuff done first? What are the parameters we're using to assess our workflows? And how might we find a way to set a plan for modernization? And lastly, when it comes to this analysis, as a technology organization, often we feel the need to talk about the platform first. But one important decision that we make as an organization is to focus on the needs of the organization first. The platform and the modernization is inevitable in some ways. We know that we need to move into the cloud because we know the cloud is the future. But let's focus on the business needs first. How has the business changed since these workflows were first brought into place? Why is this workflow not being used? Is it because people have grown tired of using it? Or is it because the process itself is obsolete? What can we get rid of? What is the information that we no longer need at the table? Because we want to be able to see the future, and the future isn't necessarily a replication of the past. We want to be able to see what our needs are and then make a decision about the platforms based on what our needs are. Some needs may have grown as the business has evolved, and some workflows may have depreciated in value the way the business has evolved. Let's make decisions about that ahead of time and get a sense of where we're going. To that end, no need to rehash a lot of what Ryan has said, but one of the platforms we have at our disposal here is the Microsoft Power Platform. This is Microsoft's business application suite that we can use to rebuild these legacy workflows in a new environment. The Power Platform is a cloud built for cloud platform that we can use to build out our legacy workflows in our new environment. We can read and write across multiple data sources, including the Microsoft Dataverse, as well as external data sources through these connectors that Microsoft has at our disposal. And we're also able to build out applications that are integrated with the Microsoft 365 suite. We can log in using our Microsoft 365 credentials, and we have a shared design language so that the applications we build will look and feel just like the Outlooks and the SharePoints of the world that we are using a coding language in PowerFX that it provides accessibility to those who may not be programmers by design. And as we've discussed, Power Apps and Power Automate are really the platforms that we want to rely on when it comes to building out workflows, excuse me. These can work independently. We can build Power Apps that just read and write data. We can build Power Automate workflows that run processes on their own. But these tools are really at their most powerful, to Ryan's point, when they're brought together, when they're leveraged together to build out solutions that take advantage of the connectors that we have, as well as the workflow capabilities that we have at our disposal. When it comes to custom applications, however, there is a lot of opportunity we have to build beyond what is available in the Power Platform. Custom applications give us the opportunity to build from the ground up. Instead of working with what is at disposal with the Power Platform, we can build out the user interface, the data structure, the different integrations that we have with our own bare hands. We can choose our dev stack, the environment that we want to build in, and really max out the control that we have of the solution. Ultimately, though, all of this opportunity comes at a cost. If we have a lot of choices to make, it'll take time to make those decisions. If we want to build from scratch, we have to dedicate that time. And with all of the platforms available at our disposal, going custom may or may not be the right decision. Ultimately, that's not really for anyone to decide but your organization. But at least one tip that we have is when it comes to working with a custom application, we think that custom applications are really well integrated for processes that are your bread and butter. What are the processes that need to work exactly as they are designed, where we can't make any compromises on what needs to be done? And really, any process where we can justify the time and cost of building from scratch could fall under that umbrella. Ultimately, the Power Platform gives us a lot of flexibility and a lot of mobility as far as how we want to build out our applications. But there is a certain opportunity that comes with going custom that could be justified if we consider the processes we're working with to be important enough. So when it comes to comparing these two different platforms as far as what to choose when you're modernizing your application, there are a few different considerations you might want to keep in mind. One piece is the user interface. So when it comes to building a Power Platform application, we've learned a lot from Ryan today about how might we do that from scratch, really. And especially with Canvas apps, the Power Platform gives us a lot of ability to build strong applications with little to no code. With the PowerFX language, we are able to build out some sophistication with an application that looks and feels like the rest of the Microsoft 365 stack. And we're able to do so with a relative ease of just being able to plug and play if we're working with a Canvas application. When it comes to the model-driven applications we've talked about, we're able to work off existing data models that we have to create applications that work. That we're able to create applications that build off data that we already have, so that we don't have to worry about putting the pieces together ourselves. Power Platform gives us a strong foundation to stand on from a user interface perspective. And to that end, when it comes to custom applications, the opportunities we have are really limitless. That being said, the opportunities that we're able to take advantage of really depend on the front-end languages that we know. How we're able to build out a user interface using the code that we have at our disposal. We can build out any interface, yes, but the complexity that we're able to take with it depends on how much we're able to invest. Whereas the foundation that comes with the Power Platform can be a lot more attainable for a lot of organizations. Of course, as I said, if the investment in the specific user interface that we want is important, a custom application may be the way to go. But the Power Platform does provide us with a good place to start if we're looking to build an application from scratch. On top of that, many of these legacy workflows will have pre-existing code associated with them. When it comes to the Power Platform, it's a lot easier to build without any existing foundation. But it also provides us with a good transition point if we're working with SharePoint Designer, InfoPath, or Nintex workflows. Power Platform is the logical progression from those platforms. So we are able to use the Power Platform to build off the processes that we have. And with some investment, there are also ways to migrate certain pieces of data and other content from the InfoPath form that we've been using into the Power Platform. Provides us with a straightforward way to replicate apps that have a well-defined purpose that may not have changed from our old environment to our new environment, especially if we're working with a tool like InfoPath in the past. And that QR code in the corner is a documentation from Microsoft that provides us a bit more context as far as how we might make the transition from InfoPath to the Power Platform. But given the fact that Power Platform is the logical progression from InfoPath and what we've seen in the past, that transition can be a lot easier if those are the platforms you're working with. To that same end, if you're building a custom application and you're working with a pre-existing application, there are benefits to transposing a legacy code base onto your new application. There are ways to build off past work and clean up code in a way that may be a lot easier than it would be to stand up a Power Platform application from scratch off your custom application. The custom applications also provide us with a venue to combine structured and unstructured data in more sophisticated and unique ways than what we find with the Power Platform. And if the nature of the data we're dealing with is complicated, then it may be easier to transpose that using the backend languages that we can use, as opposed to running through the Dataverse or Power Platform tools that may be a bit more limited. When it comes to complexity, both of these applications have a high ceiling for complexity. When it comes to the Power Platform, there is a tangible foundation that a lot of people who aren't coders can really latch onto. The PowerFX language is very similar to Excel, as we've learned a little bit about today, making it a bit more tangible for business users who are just used to using Excel or running advanced queries using Excel. There may be some additional value to working with JavaScript in a model-driven application, but when it comes to the code that is needed to build a strong application, there's there's a stronger foundation that comes with people who don't have a coding background when it comes to the Power Platform. There is both the visual interface to design an application as well as some of the PowerFX coding that some people may be more comfortable with. Of course, there are also some limitations when it comes to the complexity, as we learned a little bit in the last session. There are limitations to using SharePoint lists and in terms of querying and conducting actions. There are definitely workarounds that make things happen, but sometimes those workarounds may not be the direct path you want to take. Sometimes it might just be easier to start from scratch in a custom application. The custom application gives us opportunities to build substantial scale into the solution because we're really starting from scratch. We can optimize for what we need, whether it's speed, security, the different integrations we have, or different pieces of accessibility. But to that end, there is a built-in cost of getting things done. The Power Platform provides us with a ready-made platform to build out the applications we want, whereas we have to build a lot of that foundation ourselves with a custom application. We have to get the talent to build out the application. We need to administer it from the front and the back end of the solution and build out data structures to make the application work, as well as other pieces. Of course, sometimes that investment is justified, but the Power Platform gives us a higher place to start, especially with those who aren't experienced with code in any meaningful way. And when it comes to integrations, the Power Platform has really advanced from the days of the InfoPath workflow as far as the connectors and integrations go. So we've learned a lot about in the last session. There are connectors to the Microsoft 365 suite, places like Twilio, Google Drive, Asana, Twitter, different platforms that your business may rely on, that Power Apps and Power Automate can rely on to build out workflows that you have. These connectors make it a little bit easier to work across the different tools that you have at your disposal. The ground that we can cover through these integrations really dispels the need for some of the APIs that might be required in a custom application. Of course, if you're working in a custom application, sometimes you might need to take full advantage of the APIs and the documentation available behind them. If you're working within a software development kit, sometimes you need the flexibility that comes with those platforms. And the custom application allows us to take full advantage of these platforms as they've been designed to interact with our own. On top of that, custom apps make it easier for us to interact with other custom software that we are using, allowing us to take advantage of any sort of suite that we've developed internally to manage the work that we have at our disposal. And on top of that, the custom applications can also take advantage of the integrations available to us within Power Automate through the Azure Logic Apps infrastructure. As I've said earlier, Logic Apps builds off Power Automate to provide a platform for custom solutions to use the integrations available to us within the Power Platform. And there are differences when it comes to the two platforms, but when it comes to using Logic Apps, there are ways to leverage what is available to us with Power Automate in a way that can make our custom solutions better. And that is an opportunity that can really make a custom application dispel some of the challenges that come with using APIs and SDKs by using these built-in integrations. And when it comes to different use cases, the Power Platform is made for desktop and mobile applications, especially when it comes to the Canvas apps that we're building out, which are really well designed for building out mobile applications. It gives us one less thing to think about when we know that people are able to access the applications they need on their phone, on their tablet, or on their laptop, kind of by default. The applications we design can be optimized for them in small ways, but ultimately by building in the Power Apps platform, we're able to build out applications that can be accessed regardless of devices without necessarily having to go out of our way to design a mobile app or a tablet application that people need to install separately on their machines. When it comes to a custom application, we have to build out those different use cases ourselves. We have to build out the mobile app ourselves or the desktop application and optimize for those separate platforms as we can. It's really hard to optimize for each of these platforms out of the gate and requires that much more investment in the front end and the back end of the data to ensure that we can read across the different devices that we have. But then again, if you're only working to build a mobile application, maybe it's best to focus your efforts in on that mobile application as opposed to working with a platform that can build a mobile and desktop application right out of the gate. And another piece to consider when it comes to use cases is just Microsoft 365 integration. The Power Platform requires users to have Microsoft 365 access and running with their credentials within the environment that they're accessing the application. Whereas custom applications make it easier for an organization to provide access to a solution without any sort of set credentials within Microsoft 365. You can build out your own credential infrastructure within the application that you're building yourself. And one last piece to consider is the budget. Ultimately, as we've learned about in the last conversation, Power Apps can be a lot more straightforward when it comes to licensing. It's included with many M365 app licenses that we have available to us, and premium connectors provide a straightforward way to pay for per app or per user licenses depending on the applications we create. On top of that, from a talent standpoint, there's a bit of a lower barrier to entry when it comes to building out Power Apps, as we want to empower citizen developers in a way to design and build out the applications they want themselves. Of course, there is always potential to get technical folks involved to build out better and stronger applications of the Power Platform, but just having the familiar platform of the Power Platform makes it a lot more straightforward for people who may not have code experience to take a look at the application and provide their own input and context, and maybe even drive some of the innovations that take place from a technical standpoint. On top of that, the Power Platform makes it easy for us to manage our environment from the M365 perspective, as opposed to having a separate environment that is dedicated to our custom applications. And of course, as I mentioned a few times, a custom application requires a much larger investment. We have to stand up our own infrastructure. We have to build out our own environment so that we can launch this application. We have to work on the front end and the back end of the solution with a software engineer who is skilled in this space so that we can build an application that works for us. It's a larger investment of time and money that require to build an application that is successful from a build standpoint as well as from a design standpoint. We have a higher barrier to entry and a full stack of content to maintain. But in some cases, that may be worth it to our organization if we want the ultimate flexibility that is available to us with a custom application. So to that end, I've summarized a bit of the points that we've made here. And ultimately, there's really no right or wrong way to go when it comes to going custom or building out a Power Platform application with your app when it comes to modernizing your legacy workflows. But all of these are different costs and considerations to keep in mind when you're making a decision if custom is a way that you want to go with your legacy solutions. And once we've had a meaningful conversation about the different platforms we have at our disposal, we really want to take the time to prioritize the workflows that we have. We've taken a little bit of time already to analyze what we have, and now we want to focus on prioritizing and making a plan for the future. We want to make sure we're balancing the priorities of budget as well as business priorities to make sure that the plan we set gets us where we need to go with modernizing our legacy applications. Sometimes it makes sense to focus on the hardest platforms first, as it provides us with plenty of runway from a time and budget standpoint as we begin the hard work of modernizing our legacy workflows. But at the end of the day, when it comes to planning and stages, we want to make sure that we pick our priorities and commit to them. We don't want to get distracted by the endless opportunity that's available to us when it comes to moving to a new environment. So let's focus on a certain set of workflows and dedicate time and energy to make those ends meet. And when it comes to making those ends meet, we want to make sure that we are bridging the business and technology sides of the organization. It can be really easy to say, I am the expert in what I'm doing, so I want to build the solution that I see fit. Or it can be easy from a business perspective to say, this is what we want at all costs. Ultimately, the actual outcome should be a conversation between those two sides. We want to see a conversation between those building the application and those using the application, those who are managing data within it and those who are inputting data to the application. Managers may be processing the workflows, but what are the workflows they're processing? They're the result of their reports inputting data. So we want to make sure that we're having a fluid conversation between all sides of an organization and a process. And our job from a technology standpoint is to really amplify the voices of the people working on this solution. Of course, there is a build coming at the end of the day. We are trying to modernize an application, and there's technical work that has to be done to make that happen. But the success of that work depends on our ability to know what our business users are looking for from all different sides. And if we don't dedicate time to doing that, then the modern applications we want to build out may not be as sophisticated or useful as we want them to be. And to that end, when it comes to the modernization process, modernization means change. We have to know that the platforms we have are different than the ones 5 years ago, and the platform we may use in 5 years will be completely different as well. When we're modernizing, we are inserting ourselves into the process of a constantly changing software landscape. And when it comes to these legacy workflows, we want to embrace change over replication. This gives us an opportunity to redefine the processes that we are bringing to the cloud. The old way may not be the way we want to run with, because the old way may not have gained the adoption that we wanted or solved the business problems that we wanted. So let's find ways to drive change through this new technology that we're building out. Ultimately, if we're building a new solution, whether it's in the Power Platform or a custom application or just a separate workflow tool altogether, these new solutions may drive processes and vice versa. The way that these processes play out in this new technology context will change. And that's something that we should lean into as an opportunity as opposed to a hindrance, because we want to make sure that we are fixing the problems through our technology, not necessarily moving them onto a new platform. We don't want to migrate the problems we have with the environment that we're keeping up here. And lastly, of course, with all of this planning and strategy that comes in mind, we actually have to take the time to build. And Total Solutions has our way of approaching the build, but we do have some general tips for those who are pursuing build activity to this end. One tip to consider is depth or breadth. There is time that you can dedicate to one hairy process and make sure that you're getting it right. But there's also time that you can dedicate to trying to migrate as many workflows to the cloud as possible and rebuilding them into these new platforms. We recommend picking one or the other because they have fundamentally different motivations. Are you trying to get one workflow to run the right way, or are you trying to get out of your old environment as fast as possible? Those require different tactics to succeed and play a role in the deadlines that you're setting. If we're not, we want to make sure we're setting realistic deadlines to get the work that we have at our disposal that we have to get done. And by picking one of these two paths, that can help get us some of the way there to setting a timeline and a deadline of where we want to go. And when it comes to setting these goals, we have to keep in mind that building a new workflow is not just a build activity. There is design that's involved too. We need to talk to the people involved in these processes as we ideally would have been throughout the process. We need to build that time in throughout the build process to ensure that the application that we're piecing together provides value to the people we're building it for, and building that into our timeline and the deadlines that we set, so that at the end of the day, when we launch our application, regardless of the process we use to get there, we will have known that we've talked to our business users throughout the process here. And one great way to really set deadlines and a timeline is to work backwards and understanding your sunset strategy. If you have a legacy workflow that you want to bring onto the cloud, sometimes it's best to let go of the old workflow, but in stages. Make sense of when the old solution is going to go offline so that you can set a plan for the launch date of this new solution, how you're going to teach people about the solution, as well as how you're going to direct people to start using this new tool. If it's a Power Platform application, when am I going to share the links out to this application? To share the links out, I have to have a complete application that's been tested. When am I going to run this testing? So making sure that you understand the sunset strategy and possibly working backwards to set the date of when you want to sunset your application so that you can set steps along the way to have people test your solution and just conducting the build that we have to do all together. And lastly, the modernization process is a repeatable one. You should always be looking for ways to modernize once you've started doing it. And the process won't necessarily get easier, but as you take time to modernize your legacy workflows and business processes using these cloud applications, there are new questions that you'll be able to ask for the next solution that may make things go faster or get the answers you want sooner. And as I've said throughout the presentation, things will always change, so make sure we're leaning into that as we repeat this process. What might work, one team may have wanted to take their process and bring it directly onto the cloud, but the next team may want to completely overhaul their business process with the tools available to them in the Power Platform. Lean into that change so that we can take full advantage of what we have, so that people actually want to use the solutions that they're designing with us as digital transformation leaders. And just as a taste of how Total Solutions will approach the design and build process, the core of how we work is really focusing on Agile. And Agile is a big word in this space right now. Many people are adopting it as far as implementation or build activity go. So I don't really need to dive into the details of what this process is. But what I do want to focus on is that Agile gives us time to build a small piece and continue to iterate. Instead of building out a project plan from the start and deciding everything we need to know if we may not know it, Agile gives us the time to focus on highest priority items first, design for them, build, and then continue on. The Agile process allows us to not only focus on our priorities and ensure they get done, but it provides constant points of feedback with the customers who we're working with. And in your case, the customer may just be members of your organization. You don't want to necessarily build an application with by front ending a few hours of conversation and then showing them the built app at the end of the day. with Agile, we want to provide multiple touch points with the people we're working with so that they can see the application get built before their eyes and provide feedback along the way so that we're not going down the wrong rabbit hole and finding out too late. And ultimately, one process that comes to mind when it comes to Agile that it works out quite well for us is when it comes to a simple approval process. With Agile, we want to focus on the core data first. What are we actually approving? What do we need to know about the approval? Do we need to know addresses, names? What information is confidential versus public? And what are the different stages of the approval? So we can build out the workflow on the back end on top of building out some front end functionality with the Power App. And then once we get a basic working app together, then we can focus on refining the process that we have, making sure that the right people are getting the emails they need to accomplish the steps they need in their approval, as well as building out an application that people actually want to use. So by working in an agile fashion, we don't have to make all of those decisions at once. We can focus on the decisions we want to make, the high priorities decisions about the data we want first, and then working to build out the user interface and the way that we interact with the solution once we've gotten the core functionality down and having multiple touch points with the customers we're working with along the way. And we hope that you can take this to your own organization when it comes to working with different departments or sets of departments to build out new workflows by providing constant points of feedback and iteration with the people you're working with. And ultimately, if you need assistance with any part of this process, whether it is the actual build activity or just getting things off the ground, we want to make sure that we have that opportunity available to you. So if you're looking for an assessment with the workflows that you have at your disposal, Total Solutions is very willing to take time to look at it. And for those who are here at the summit today, we want to make sure that we can provide a simple assessment to you with your legacy workflows. Whether you want to go through an enterprise change and change many different workflows to move to the cloud, or if you just want to focus on one or two workflows to get a taste of our process or focus on your highest priorities, this workflow assessment gives us a great opportunity to look into your team's data and process that you want to modernize and provide a little bit of a plan for the future, as well as envisioning what the future might look like. We're not necessarily looking to build right now, but at least getting a sense of where your team is at so that we can take the first steps in your path to modernization, whether that's with us in-house or with another vendor. We at least want to help you take those first steps that we talked through a little bit today. And with that in mind, I'm open to any questions that we have. We can drop them in the chat. But either way, thank you so much for taking the time to listen to me today, talk about the business process here as far as modernizing our workflows go. The QR code on the bottom is to a survey about this event. So feel free to fill that out when you have the time. I believe it also will be sent out with the event video if you want to take some time to fill it out then. But definitely open to any questions we have in the chat about the platforms as well as the process to move towards modernization. Okay, John has a question here when it comes to a Microsoft cloud-based intranet, using a Microsoft cloud-based intranet to take advantage of workflow tools. So what John's referring to is do we need a SharePoint intranet in place to be able to modernize our workflows? And what I'll say to that is kind of. So when I think about SharePoint is a front end and a back end experience. The front end experience is the intranets that many of us are used to, a company homepage and a place for us to exchange information and ideas with each other, as well as to receive communications from those who are leading our organization. But there's also a back-end component when it comes to managing data that we have across teams and across functions so that we can access the Word documents we're working on, the slide decks, the shared data that we have in one place. And I think from a SharePoint perspective, as to what Ryan alluded to earlier, SharePoint lists are a great way to manage data when it comes to building out Power Platform applications in the cloud. So to have a SharePoint list doesn't necessarily need a robust intranet, but you do need some of the basis of the SharePoint backend. So having a separate SharePoint site that is solely dedicated to the list that you have at your disposal. You don't necessarily need to make it just a functional SharePoint list. It doesn't have to be a site that is only a list. The list can be contained within a larger front-end intranet experience that you have. But the point is that with SharePoint, you can really run either way. Having a site in place with the Microsoft 365 license you have in place is pretty easy when it comes to using SharePoint. So whether you have a fully fleshed out intranet and the list that your application is accessing takes advantage of that, or if you just want to use SharePoint list as a way to manage your data on the back end, you can just build out sites that exist on their own, that the only access point is through the applications you're building out in the modern workflow tools. So definitely no need for a full front-end intranet, but definitely can add to the experience SharePoint from the front end and the back end by using SharePoint to build out your applications. And then another question that John had here is, are we able to rebuild previously built workflows in the Power Platform if there's any overlap in functionality? So I'm kind of looking through the wording of the question to be clear here. So workflows, if there's an overlap in functionality. Yeah, so I think that I can address that at least from a business perspective, and I think that comes in when you're working with workflows that have multiple purposes or that work in tandem with other processes. One thing that we find with customers a lot is that we often want to think about that redesign intentionally. There may be applications there's maybe applications where data is only used by that one application, but I think the example you're referring to is there may be 5 or 6 applications that run off the same set of data. And I think that one way we think about it is that if we want to design the data first and then have applications pull from that source of data, that allows us to not only take advantage of work through multiple processes at once, but also allows us to take advantage of the shared data platforms we have with a SharePoint list or the Microsoft Dataverse. So by focusing on a bit on the data first, it allows us to modernize the processes all at once, so to speak. So we can figure out these are 5 applications that are communicating with this one shared pool of data. How might we design that pool of data so that the 5 applications we use get what they need from the application? And when it comes to previously built workflows, I can at least speak for on the on-premise to cloud context. We are able to migrate data from lists using ShareGate so that we can take data that existed in the old application that may have interacted with multiple info platforms, bring those to the Power Platform so that the Power Platform applications we build out can mirror that functionality by accessing the same set of mixed data in that way. Any other questions from the crowd here? Feel free to drop them into the chat. And if not, we can definitely get in contact with you, Total Solutions or myself, to address any questions you have.
We could do the good old fashioned going once, going twice.
Auctioneer John.
Yeah, it's my second profession, actually. But yeah, if no one else has any other questions here, it doesn't look like we have anything here in the chat. But yeah, to close out the event, just want to again say thank you to everyone who made it, stayed through the whole session or joined at some point. It's always great to spend time with like-minded individuals to talk about fun things like Microsoft and Power Platform. And so one piece here before we close out, we are going to drop a link into the chat around a feedback survey. We'd love to hear from you guys around what topics you'd like to see in the future. We'd love to give some feedback to Adit and Ryan just on their presentation and the content as well. And lastly, I don't think I would be doing my job if I didn't plug a bit on what Adit mentioned around the Power Platform assessment, workflow modernization, or anything related to Microsoft 365. Feel free to reach out to myself or to any of the folks kind of putting on this event from Total Solutions, and we'd be happy to set up a meeting or talk through anything specific there. And also, if you do have anything on the training side, I know there's questions around Dynamics training, please reach out to Ryan and the United team, or reach out to us and we can connect you to them. And I'm sure they would be happy to help. But lastly here, I did want to give a big round of applause to Adit and to the presenters for doing a great job on presenting this morning and afternoon. And again, thank you to all of you guys who were able to join the meeting this today and to be able to grow this community here around Microsoft 365.
Thank you so much, everyone. I appreciate it. Feel free to contact me or John if you have any questions.
All right, everyone, have a great day. And we look forward to putting on our next M365 Summit, hopefully coming out early next quarter. So we'll keep everyone posted there. Have a great day.